Welcome to Block by Block, where we dive into timely topics at the intersection of crypto, tech, and society. I'm your host, Danelle Dixon, CEO and Executive Director of the Stellar Development Foundation. Today, I'm talking to Laura Shin, crypto journalist, author, Unchained podcast host, and much, much more. We discuss what it's like to cover a fast-moving industry like crypto, the crash of a certain algorithmic stablecoin called TerraUSD, which is the big topic of debate in recent weeks, the writing process in reaction to her latest book, The Cryptonians, which tells the story of Ethereum, and what she's working on next. So let's jump in. Laura, welcome to Block by Block. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, you're my first guest, and it's a great person to kick us off because as a journalist covering crypto, you have such a unique vantage point compared to those of us who are working in the industry. I think on a recent episode that I listened to of The Chopping Block, you mentioned that you think of yourself as a referee in relation to the crypto space. What did you mean when you said that?
Like I'm not a player in the game.
So you can call the game from the sidelines for us.
sort of. Even then, I don't necessarily feel that I'm like judging anything. It's more that I'm reporting what's happening. So not quite a referee, but what I mean by that is I don't feel that I'm in crypto, but what I like to say is that I'm as close as you could be to being in crypto without actually being in it. Because like I said, I don't consider myself a player in crypto. And so, yeah, I just feel that my sources they're definitely in it. But yeah, when I write about the industry, like I definitely feel like I'm an outsider writing on what's happening in the industry.
Yeah. Well, we need people like you to be able to sometimes ground us because the industry does get a little bit crazy. I want to start just a little bit with your background. So you're a journalist, an author, and a podcast host. You left Forbes magazine in 2019 to focus on your podcasts and videos, which are awesome. And you really were, from our standpoint, certainly one of the first crypto journalists for a mainstream outlet. First, did I get all that right?
Yeah. I actually think it's not even that I think, but I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure that I'm the first mainstream media journalist to cover crypto full time, because I had been a freelancer at Forbes for a long time. And then when I finally went full time with them, it was because they finally agreed to only let me cover crypto and nothing else. And none of my competition was only covering crypto exclusively. So I believe that I was the first to cover it full time.
And when did that happen? When were you the first? Because 2019 is when you left. So you were covering it as the first, like pretty early. And
that was 2017. Yeah. And it was 2018 when I left Forbes.
Oh, 2018.
But I'm still very friendly with them. And when I revealed who I believe is behind the DAO attack, I published it in Forbes. So, yeah.
So how did the crypto light bulb moment come for you? Like, what was that? When did you realize that all of this stuff that's happening in crypto is going to be something you wanted to focus on?
Pretty much right from the start, frankly. I was doing the Forbes FinTech 50 list, which that year that I was doing it in 2015 was their inaugural year. And I took the category of digital currencies, and there was this person who explained Bitcoin to me in a very animated way. And they like really, really, really explained it, not just kind of like give me quick explanations, but like they just kind of just really painted a whole picture of what it was. And I, kind of walked out of that interview just understanding that, oh, this is going to change everything. And part of the reason I understood that was because through reporting on the FinTech 50 list, I was becoming very well acquainted with what all the flaws were in the banking system. And I was understanding that this was a decades old system and that Bitcoin was the first thing that was like truly digital when it came to our money. That, when you log into PayPal or Venmo or your bank account, that is not actually digital money. I always say that that's a digital veneer on an analog system. And so Bitcoin was like the first truly digital money. And, I think I just understood right away that this is a breakthrough. And yeah, it's amazing to me that it's been 7 years that I've been covering the industry. And it's really the fastest 7 years of my life. I've covered so many other things as a journalist, but nothing else anywhere near as long as I've covered crypto. And I cannot imagine myself doing anything else. It's so fun. There's so many things changing all the time. So it's just good for my personality because I get, if I get bored with something, like if I find it too easy, I just lose all interest. But because like crypto is so challenging, like I can never get bored. It's like there's some fresh new challenge every day and like constantly learning new things, like crazy new things are happening all the time. And so I just love it. It's so fun. It's been, the 7 most fun years of my career.
Well, I think that I definitely agree with the fact that everything is changing so quickly. It's hard for all of us to, even in the industry, it's hard for us to keep up with the different pieces of things that are going on out there. I'll tell you that thinking back to 2015, and that's when you said that sort of the light bulb went off for you and understanding what Bitcoin was all about. Was it a time when, given that your experience with fintech, that you actually thought that Bitcoin could solve that, or you just thought that this technology could solve it?
Oh, yeah. It's funny because that was the era of blockchain, not Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So all my sources were telling me it was going to be that blockchain, not Bitcoin thing. And so at that time, I thought it was going to be that blockchain technology would be the revolution. And when I say that, I mean kind of more the enterprise type stuff. And clearly I was very wrong. And my sources were wrong. But it's just funny because for that first FinTech 50 list, I did not put Coinbase on the list because they weren't pivoting that way. And they in the interview, it was very clear that they thought that this was like a stupid thing. And I thought, they don't get it. They don't know what they're doing. Like everybody else is going this other direction and they're not. And now I'm like, oh my God, like they had such conviction and they really saw the future. And I was coming in like brand new and thought that I knew what I was talking about and I didn't. So I definitely feel now that, history is borne out that really it's the assets and kind of the way the incentives work and all those things that has been the revolutionary new thing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you walked into it, especially at that time, there was still already a lot of information coming out of it. Not as much as I think that we have today, where things change daily, but there was still a lot of information. And I'll tell you, even when I joined SDF in 2019, we still had the view that we should be talking about blockchain and not using even that Bitcoin moniker, because that was actually a problem to be able, and from a regulatory standpoint, to be honest, sometimes it was. I think it's not anymore today. But it is one of those like things that you sort of figure out, like, what does it mean to be blockchain or crypto? Now I feel like we can call it all crypto, but at the time it was definitely, even in 2019, it was definitely a way to focus away from getting involved in crypto specific discussions. So you're kind of doing everything, which I love. And your book, The Cryptopians, came out last fall. Through like telling the story of Ethereum, you also really covered a lot of ground on a moment in time in crypto history, like how the ICO craze happened. I mean, to think about that now, just how the ICO craze happened, and maybe today we'll talk about a different craze that's happening, but you also capture a lot of the philosophical debates that happened around the creation of this technology. So why did you decide on this topic, or how did you decide on this topic?
I left Forbes in February 2018, and that was really the height of that bubble of the 2017, 2018 ICO craze. And I knew that I'd witnessed history. And I'd not only witnessed it, but I'd witnessed it from a front row seat. And my own life had changed in 2017. I started 2017, like I was doing everything the way I'd always been doing it. Like, I was freelancing for Forbes, freelancing for other outlets. I had started the podcast already, but I just thought I was going to keep doing that. And things just were moving so quickly in crypto that at a certain point, Forbes realized like, oh, we should have somebody covering it full time. And it made sense that it would be me because I was all in and I'd been begging them for a long time to let me cover that exclusively. And I was getting all these other job offers too. I was like, suddenly there was this kind of awareness amongst publications that they really need people on this. And just the amount of like inbound I was getting all the time, like all these crypto projects and everything, it was just like my life had changed so much. And I really wanted to explain, how did that craze happen? And so when I went to write the book, that's really just the question that I wanted to answer with it. And ultimately, what I realized is that Ethereum was kind of like the crux of it all. That was the platform that had enabled all that. And the funny thing is, I actually was even going to have this whole section on how Coinbase became the on ramp that enabled the ICO craze. Because as you probably are well aware, they kept like crashing in 2017 because there was so much demand to get on the platform. But ultimately, I was like, oh, the book is already so long and I cannot fit that information in as well. So I have all this reporting on Coinbase, which I will use someday, I promise. But, I already wrote 3 chapters on it and I had to ditch it. So ultimately, I just realized, okay, so ultimately most of this is going to focus on Ethereum. And that's why it's only really at the end of the book that we get to the ICO craze, because I basically give that whole backstory of all the things that led up to allow that craze to happen.
Well, what I love about it is you really talk about it from the human side. So you have a lot of discussions around the individuals that were involved. So how do you do that? Obviously, it's not just from one interview. You're getting lots of different perspectives on each of these people that are involved in that. So how do you choose who you're going to bring into to interview to be able to come up with this?
Yeah, so I interviewed more than 200 people for the book, and a lot of it was just through the book or through these interviews, figuring out kind of like what really happened. And then from there, I could kind of like cut out certain people, like, okay, they weren't really central to this or that. And so, I because it's a decentralized story, there's like a gazillion people that were involved. And that's why I had to start the book with this list of characters. And it's 50 people long. And this is after I had cut a whole bunch of people out. And even then, this was like, as best as I could get it to like something people could follow. And even then I just found it like very unwieldy. I'm amazed like people have managed to follow what happened because it just feels like there's so many people all the time. But it's kind of like trying to find that balance between accuracy and then like keeping a tight story. But anyway, the point is that when you have that many people, like for instance, at some of these meetings where a lot of fights happen and there was like tension, there might be, like 15 people at this meeting. And so I would just interview as many of them as I could. And whenever someone said something, and especially if they were saying this other person said this or did that or whatever, then I'd kind of go around to everybody else, try to verify, like, did they actually say that? What did they say? Did they say that? And if it's something where like 6 people remember that they said it and they're denying it, then, I'm going to write it in a way where I'm saying they did say it, but I'll include their denial or whatever. But all of that is like extremely time consuming. And frankly, because so many people in Ethereum did not have nice things to say about the other people, it just made the fact checking like really time consuming because you want to give everybody a chance to respond to anything, especially anything negative that's said about them. And so, there was very extensive fact checking that we had to do. And when people, if they responded, we then had to insert their responses. So it was a Herculean effort. But how
long did it from start to finish?
I would say like 3 years. If you include the proposal period, then closer to 4. But, because there's like a lot of very wealthy people in this book that don't come across well, I do feel that despite how long all the fact checking took and everything, that I can really stand behind everything in the book. And so I don't have to worry, in that regard.
Well, and this was your first book, right?
Kind of. Yeah. I've written some ebooks before, but they were just like, they were the kinds of things I just wrote a few months.
And so then I saw that you're working on a new book about the Bitcoin couple, Morgan and Lichtenstein. And oh my, that story is just fascinating and has gotten so much attention. What was your initial reaction to the story?
I think I was having a lot of flashbacks to the investigation I had done into the DAO attacker, because if you notice the government's complaint, they're just like building this case and like putting all these clues together. And so there are certain things when you do like blockchain analytics, you're like trying to look for points where you can connect transactions to an identity. So you'll like follow the transactions along, and then like, at a certain point, you might be able to link it to, an account at an exchange and blah, blah, blah. And so I think my first reaction was just like, oh, I like kind of not like in a dismissive way, like been there, done that, but just like this feeling of recognition of like, oh my God, whoever this person is that wrote this, the way they did this is very similar to how, I had done this with my sources. So I think there was this like feeling of familiarity. And then, another reaction I had was, wow, some of these, facts that the government is putting in this complaint are very mundane. Like they're, Wall Street, Walmart gift cards that they had purchased, stuff like that. I think I tweeted something like that because it was just very funny to me that, this
billions of dollars, and then they're focusing on the Wall Street.
Yeah, that's cards, what the government used as evidence. So, I think I just was like really struck by this is how it's done. It's sort of like that. What do they call it? What is it? Gumshoe detective, whatever, kind of just piece by piece, just putting it all together, just laying it out. And it feels very mundane at the time when you're doing it. But then when you create this whole picture, then you kind of, start to see how it all comes together. But, I think that's because of, like I said, because of the familiarity to the investigation I had done with the DAO. That's why my agent and I felt that this would be a good next project for me to tackle, because one remaining question that has not been resolved is who actually did that hack of Bitfinex. And so, I don't know if I'll be able to figure it out, but, I'll definitely try using a lot of the same techniques that I used before.
Well, that is actually, I've read a lot about this just in the different stories that have been out. And that is my question. And it's clear that they don't try to link them directly to that attack. But then you wonder, how did they get access to it? So it's a question that it would be awesome to be able to read in your book, to see what were the reactions to your initial book on Cryptopians?
Well, I think, I've heard time and again, people feel it's like the authoritative history on Ethereum, that, my account has a lot more detail than some of the others, that it kind of gives more of a look at Vitalik than the others, that, I was really able to show who he is as a person. One thing that I didn't realize when I went to when I started the book, when I started reporting it, I didn't realize how much the book would end up being a coming of age story for Vitalik. And it was only when I had the reporting and I went to write it that I really understood that. And I remember that because I narrate the audiobook, when I was reading the ending of that for the audiobook, we kept having to stop and start because I kept tearing up and I wasn't able to just like read it straight. Because, he grew a lot during that period. And it's not like he, at the end of it, is radically different. A lot of people talk about certain character flaws that Vitalik has. And, a lot of them were still very much with him as a person, but he'd kind of come up with his ways to compensate for those deficiencies. And so just seeing how far he'd come, I really was touched by that. And like I said, it wasn't something I had an awareness of when I went to write it. In terms of the reaction, though, I think because the book is such a warts and all telling of Ethereum, there's definitely been a certain mixed response from some people, such as Vitalik himself, who, as far as I understand, has not read the book. And I think has mixed feelings about the fact that I did not hold back and I was willing to reveal things that may not reflect well on Ethereum. But the reason for that is, I wasn't trying to hurt him in any way, but it was more that I just feel all of this is so important from a historical perspective. And I wanted people 100 years from now to know what really happened. And so for that reason, I wasn't going to try to protect anybody's ego or anything. And so that's why, if people behaved badly, if I could verify it and corroborate it, it was going to go in the book. And, a lot of these people that, did behave badly, they were upset with me. Like I had some really tough fact checking conversations and emails, and, some people really took it out on me. And I just was like, Laura, don't react. You're here to do a job. You're here to get the facts. And that was my goal. I just wanted to know, as far as I could, verify it, like what happened. And if I could verify it, I was going to put it in the book. So, that's why I think first of all, one other reaction that I'm getting a lot is a lot of people who lived through these events have been tweeting that the book is so accurate to their experience that they feel it does the best job of capturing what actually happened in Ethereum at that time. And also, I've even had a bunch of developers reach out to me and say that, first of all, people were saying things like, your technical descriptions are flawless. Like, I literally can't quibble with a single one. Other developers were just like, wow, you explained all these things so well. One of them was like, Laura, I'm learning things from your book.
That's so awesome.
So yeah, so I feel really good in that regard, that even the accuracy like extends to all the technical stuff, which, as I'm sure you're aware, in the DAO section got really challenging. But I do feel, that I was able to really get it all. And it was through, that meticulous process that I followed.
Well, and I think, to your point about Vitalik and the part of the story that has Vitalik in it, I think it is so important, because a lot of times that's how people really understand, is when they see the human part of it too. And so telling a story with all of it in there, I think, is just a really crucial way for people to get the feeling and the sense of what was actually happening, not just fact number one, fact number two, fact number three. So I think that that's what makes it special. And I just wonder, from your standpoint, whether or not people are paying close attention to crypto's developments, what do you want people to take away from both of these stories? Like the one that you're writing now, which I think is fascinating too from a technical standpoint. I think that's going to be really interesting, sort of following that maze there. But what is it that you want people to take away from these kinds of stories?
So for the second book, because I have, I literally just announced the book deal. I don't even have a deadline or anything. So I can't say that I've worked on it too much. But for the first one, I would say, like, people are often talking about blockchain technology as this like trustless software, or they, want to make it sound like it's these like automated, like autonomous, like, this kind of bloodless software that gets created. But no, there's very much like human dynamics at play, human power struggles, greed, like, there's a lot of people, people are seeing it now, with all these rug pulls. There are a lot of people who will try to take advantage of you. And so, the reason in the title why my editor and I, we spent a long time figuring out this mix of words: idealism, greed, lies. Mm-hmm. And initially it was something like, idealism. So I forget what the second word was, but originally I had two positive words and two negative ones, because I wanted to emphasize that it's really just like kind of a mix. Because now it does feel like I'm like making it seem like it's more of the negative. But in the end, the two positive words are kind of the same thing. I think we basically felt, and it's just cleaner to have three. But the point is that, it's like anything in life. There's nothing in life where you can look at it and it's like all 100% good, and these technologies are the same. You get all these people involved, and some of them, they're more like Vitalik. They're more idealistic. They're more pure. They have good intentions. There are other ones, they're not like that. They're more self-interested. They're more greedy. Some of them, yes, will lie. It's like, it's just like anything else. So you have to be aware. And I really felt like showing that human side, and just all the, even like the petty jealousies and all that come into play in the development of these technologies. Like, it's just kind of funny how these like people, felt that Gavin Wood like often, slighted them or was like being arrogant toward Ethereum. And then later on, they weren't willing to help him. And, I it's not to say if they'd been friendly, if they would have helped him. There's a lot of factors there, but certainly the fact that, they had a lot of bad blood between them and Gavin Wood did not help him when, it came to his time of need. So, I definitely feel that it's important for people to understand that, this software doesn't just like descend from the sky. It has like, just no, what's the word? Any, charged energy around it, because there's like a lot of politics that gets involved as well.
Well, and I think that that's so true with any kind of software. I think it's actually, when people would say for better or for worse, I think it's for the better that we actually have that human component to it, but we have it everywhere. In AI, you just think about every algorithm that's created, and it's very much the same as in blockchain. There are opinions, even though we try to be as unopinionated as we can. But given all, I mean, what you just talked about in terms of those stories, for those listening, we're recording this on May 13th, and it's been a wild ride this week. Many of the conversations have been about UST, and it's depegged from the dollar. So just a quick aside for anyone not familiar, there are a few different kinds of tokens that currently use the label of stablecoin. Some are fully backed in cash and short-term and short-dated US Treasuries. But on the other hand, there's algorithmic stablecoins like UST, and they attempt to maintain their pegs to fiat currencies using algorithms. UST, which is supposed to be pegged 1-to-1 to the US dollar, recently fell sharply below the $1 mark. And in fact, right now, as of this recording, it's right around 17 cents. So Terra's handling of this has been an interesting watch this week, to say the least. And Laura, I just listened to your Unchained podcast from today, May 13th, with John Woo. Everyone should go and take a listen because there's a lot in there that's interesting. So you've obviously spent some time looking at this. What do you make of all of this that's happened so far this week?
Wow. There's, it's almost too soon to say, but probably some of the takeaways are that oftentimes when things happen in crypto, they happen very, very quickly. I've noticed this time and again. I mean, I chronicled the Dow, like how quickly that sort of sprang up. Then later when you had the ICO craze, like that snowballed so fast because there was a period where you'd have these sleepy ICOs and, it was kind of a thing. And then all of a sudden it was a huge global phenomenon, billions of dollars sloshing around the planet. And, it was similar here where the first, I guess, like day or two, Do Kwon was being his normal cocky self, on Twitter, kind of, he tweeted something like, oh, like, UST is off its peg. You wake up and you notice, what do? Do you go for a run or do you, and he basically, was implying he was just going to go for a run. And so, then within a few short days, it's like, yeah, just everything came crashing down. So that's one takeaway. But that's sort of about crypto generally. I think another one probably really is that, so you probably heard in my interview with John Woo that I asked him kind of where he thought Terra, the ecosystem would go from here. And he basically felt that, they would probably dust themselves off and try to continue on. And I was incredulous. And I was even incredulous at the thought that anybody would try to do another algorithmic stablecoin. And so I was like laughing and a little bit like, what are you thinking? And then hilariously, this morning I woke up and I somehow, I don't know why, but just like immediately, like when I woke up, I was like, oh, he's right. I was like, they're going to try again. And then hilariously, I was on Twitter and I see Tushar Jain of Multicoin Capital, which is this extremely, extremely successful VC firm. And he is quote tweeting this thread by something called UXD. And he's like, yes, as we've learned from the lessons with Terra, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what the tweet said, but it basically was saying like this other model could work. And I check out the UXD thread and it's a new algorithmic stablecoin. And, they were talking about how they're differentiated from UST. And then I checked back to the rest of Tushar's thread. And he's like, by the way, Multicoin is an investor in UXD. I should disclose that. And I was just like, of course, John was right. Like, why did I think they wouldn't try this again? But, I mean, I do think that even though a lot of these entrepreneurs and VC firms will be interested in trying something again, I do think obviously they're going to take away lessons from this. I've already seen people saying things like, oh, if Anchor hadn't been so aggressive, if the interest rate hadn't been 19.5%, then maybe they could have like grown the ecosystem more slowly and in a way that was, just more cautious. And then it wouldn't be vulnerable to this kind of like huge fast unwinding. Cause when you get that death spiral going, it can go really fast. But if you have something where you haven't kind of like subsidized all this free money basically for people, then you wouldn't have as many people running for the exits. So who knows, people may try this again in a learning lessons here and try in what they perceive to be safer way. But I do wonder if, it's going to get regulators to come in, because as we've seen there have been a lot of people who have been posting about, losing all their money, whatever. And on top of that, what differentiates this from other similarly sized debacles in crypto, the only other two that I can think of are when Mt. Gox lost all its Bitcoins, and then the DAO hack. This is the third. But what's different about it is that here you had these very, very reputable VCs backing Terra. It was Mike Novogratz and Galaxy. It was like Pantera, they've been around forever, Polychain Capital, Block Tower, Coinbase Ventures. Coinbase is supposedly, the public company, is very conservative, whatever. And these were all backing, even more big name investors were backing Terra. Whereas Mt. Gox was like this random French person who definitely should have never been an entrepreneur. He was in charge of Mt. Gox. And then DAO was like, these random developers who they definitely didn't know what they were doing. It was just like literally two people coded it up, So this was just sort of like a different thing. Like you had all this reputation and this credibility backing this ecosystem. So I think, I personally would imagine a lot of everyday people, saw that as a sign of safety. And so I do think, it's going to have.
I think that one of the challenges that I see here is, I do think you're right that regulation, there's too much that came together this week with just the market, the traditional markets crashing as well. And then this happening, and then lots of folks losing money with respect to this. And that's of course what attracts regulation. I think that the other thing is we've just seen a steady stream of focus on stablecoins generally and what stablecoins are in the US in particular. I think that, this is going to continue to be a big topic in regulation. And I also think that whether or not like the notion of these algorithmic tokens that are pegged to a fiat-backed currency or a fiat currency, whether those continue to be valuable and continue to exist, I think that you're right, that there's no question that that's going to happen. I don't think people could have learned lessons already, because I think we do need to sort of go through this and experience it a bit more and figure out what actually happened and then learn that. But my larger question, I think, is whether they should be called stablecoins, because that is what lends a lot of credibility and trust to them. And I think I think that's what we're going to see lawmakers focus on for over the next several weeks, unfortunately, and then of course over the next year to be able to sort of make that right. But I did, when I listened to the podcast and I heard him say that he believed that there would be the next, and then you're like, what? It was like, yeah, that's how I feel too. But then I realized there might be a place for it, and we just don't see it yet. And we do have to take a lot of lessons away from this. So it's fascinating. More to come there. You should listen to Laura's podcast on that. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. These days, everyone is talking about the moniker Web3. And I feel like even back in November, that's sort of when it started to be applied to everything sort of in crypto and blockchain. I was actually testifying in the United States in Congress at that time. And I remember it was one of the first times that it was very clear in the room. Everybody recognized that Web3 is what we're supposed to call ourselves now. So there's just so much going on. And it doesn't really seem to be clear agreement about what Web3 actually is. How do you describe Web3?
Oh, I think it's the part of the web that enables decentralization and true ownership in a digital space. So, it's what enables NFTs. It's what enables people to form DAOs. It's what enables something like Bitcoin to be this commodity that's purely digital, but that isn't owned by anybody or controlled by anybody. So that, ownership layer of the internet, basically.
Yeah, I think that it's so funny because back in the early days of the web, that was sort of what we focused on. Like way back when, it was really that decentralization. I think we got away from that a lot. The underlying stack is still decentralized, and then everything else became very centralized on top of it. So I agree with you. In terms of, you've been covering the crypto space so much longer than most people have. And as we talked about, everything sort of goes at a breakneck pace. And even those working in crypto, they have a really hard time keeping up with it. How do you do it? How do you keep up with all of the different things that are happening in crypto?
I just cannot. It's not possible. It's literally my job to do that. And I can't because, a couple of things, it's like, so right now my work is split up into things where it's like very long-term deadlines and then very short-term deadlines. So the way that I manage that is because personally, I feel it would be easier if I was only doing breaking news, right? Because then I would always be like just looking for the next thing and then writing or reporting about it in the moment. But because I'm going back to like investigate things in 2016, 2017, whatever, and I have to really enter that world and in order to be able to write about it in the way that I would like to, that takes like a certain amount of concentration and like hours of research and just all kinds of stuff. And so basically the way that I manage it for my show is very deadline driven. So when I have to know about something, I will be sure to, make the time to prepare and write those questions and have an understanding of that material. But it's funny because I've had some people when they come on the show, they're very nervous and they'll be like, but Laura, you know everything happening in crypto. And I'm like, no, I don't. This is like an illusion. Like,
don't ever let them know that you don't know everything. Just it seems like you do. So you can just leave it at that.
I'm happy to admit it because it's like not humanly possible. There are people who I consider people who are like way more in the know because, they're at the center of everything. And they'll tell me it's impossible to keep up. I literally don't think there's a single person who is up on everything. I just think it's not possible, which is, that's not the case from 2015 when I was covering it, but initially, but yeah, now, I personally feel like, because I've already been noticing that other crypto media have been specializing in certain verticals. There's like people that like only cover NFTs or only do DeFi or whatever it might be there, or only do Bitcoin or only do Ethereum. And it's true that I kind of thought about doing something like that, but it doesn't make sense for me because I started out covering it all and it would be a pivot for me to only focus on one thing. And then I'd probably be alienating some listeners. So, I just try to kind of keep abreast of like all the major trends happening. So that way I know like, okay, if I'm going to do a show on regular or like, at the moment, there's something percolating in regulation that I really need to cover for my listeners, or like there's this new Bitcoin thing that I have to talk about. And so, then I'll like do the deep dive to make sure I understand, but generally, no, it's not possible. And also I have to admit, I have help, my assistant right now is like amazing. And I'm actually hiring more people. Well,
I'm glad to hear that you have some support there. So I'm really interested in guest perspectives on how they see crypto impacting society more broadly from where they sit. So from where you're sitting as a journalist, and you've been in the game a long time. I've actually seen journalism shift so much with respect to crypto. The fact that you just said that there are folks specializing now in crypto is hilarious to me because that is relatively a new trend, even in the last 3 years. So how have you seen crypto journalism change?
Oh, it's just so much better. People just have such a better understanding of what this is. But I've definitely also seen a lot more mainstream media get into it in a way that they were not previously. And, even things like data, I'm noticing, there's so many more data providers. So, obviously, every chain has different block explorers, but there are like data providers that are pulling data from those block explorers to kind of package it up in different ways. So, there's like Dune Analytics where people can go in and create their own queries. And then some people's dashboards that they created, they're often cited, in articles and stuff, or you can go on the block and they have their own dashboard. Nansen there. I mean, there's just so many of these like Crypto Slam, L2 Beats, like it's literally, there's so many. So all the time when there's some kind of like new niche in crypto, I'll suddenly realize like, oh, here's a good website where they're kind of like wrapping up all the metrics and everything that's happening. And I'm constantly learning new ones, it's like, there are ones for like only stable coins and, whatever. I mean, there's just so many of these. So.
Well, we're very lucky that you're in this space and have been for so long, focusing on all of these issues. Thank you so much for the conversation, Laura. I kept you here for a while. I want to ask you one last question, and that is, where can people go to keep up with you and all of your work?
So you can follow me on Twitter at Laura Shin, SHIN. I also have an author website, laurashin.com. And you can Actually, I'm at Laura Shin on basically every platform, except I think on Facebook, it's Unchained with Laura Shin. So yeah, feel free to check out all my stuff and sign up for my newsletter.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm grateful for your time, and thanks for being our first guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Block by Block. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified when new episodes are released, and follow me on Twitter to stay in the loop in between episodes. I'll talk to you next time.